Alexander, how are you doing
hmm
this evening? We did a
I'm
live
very well
yesterday.
this evening.
It seems like we were just here.
I know. Well, I mean, with Brexit, I'm afraid there's never a dull moment. I mean, we're drifting ever further away from our constitution and procedures now, and politics are becoming so complicated and so strange. But it's an exciting story, if it's nothing else.
All right, do you guys see us
Sad
at
story too,
it?
actually.
Yes, it is. If you guys see us in the chat,
Mm.
let us know. If the sound is good, let us know. Gloria, hi gentlemen. Hello. All right, it looks like hello from Yorkshire. Good morning from Melbourne, St. Louis, Missouri, England, Durham. All right. We have people in England, Englishmen in France, back again. Yes, Seattle is here. All right, guys, it looks like the sound is good. If you can hear me, let me know. If you can hear Alexander, let me know in the chat. Welcome back to another Duran show. I have with me the Oracle of London, Mr.
Mhm.
Alexander Mercuris. Alexander, we have more Brexit news. My God,
I'm
Brexit.
afraid so. We've had lots of Brexit news. In fact, this has been a dramatic day. Can I just explain? We've had
Go
a whole
let just
succession of
Alexander
events.
just jump right into it. To be
Yeah.
honest, I'm so confused at this point. It's just
I think most people are. But let's wheel back a little to what happened on Friday when Theresa May brought forward her Brexit plan, this deal that she's done that everyone hates. She brought it back to the House of Commons, um, um, saying basically that this is, the third chance to vote for it. And of course, the House of Commons rejected it by 58 votes, despite the fact that some of the leading Brexiteers, people like Boris Johnson, Jacob Rees-Mogg, David Davis, Dominic Raab, they all voted for it this time. But nonetheless, it was rejected, and a hardcore of 34 Conservative MPs continued to vote against it. So there was then talk that there was going to be a general election. There was some talk that Theresa May was going to resign. She didn't resign. There was no moves to remove her. The suggestion of a general election horrified the entire political class, especially the conservative part of the political class, because they're terrified of a general election, which could bring Jeremy Corbyn in as Prime Minister of Britain, and nobody wants that. And the Conservative Party isn't ready for such a general election. So there was no general election. Then on Monday, we had the so-called indicative votes, which were proposed by various members of Parliament, people who are not members of the government, led by this Conservative MP, this arch Remainer Conservative MP, Sir Oliver Letwin. And the idea was that these indicative votes would show which policy for Brexit Parliament could unite around. And the idea was to force the government, Theresa May, and the government to accept either a very soft Brexit or to create a circumstance which would essentially prevent Brexit happening entirely. And various proposals were put forward for indicative votes. And I've explained on previous programs, and I've also sent, by the way, to Alex here a legal opinion which I read earlier today. I've explained why, in my opinion, this whole project for indicative votes and for attempts to legislate a Brexit outcome which the government is opposed to is actually unconstitutional, since it violates the basic constitutional principle of the separation of powers between Parliament and government. And this is now incidentally becoming the legal consensus. Various constitutional lawyers have weighed in, and they've all said that this is an extremely bad way to go forward. Anyway, the result of those indicative votes was, nonetheless, that no proposal for a soft Brexit or for a referendum, a second referendum, or for revoking Article 50, none of those proposals won a majority. all of them were defeated. So the result was, as of yesterday, there was no plan for Brexit at all. Theresa May's plan had been rejected on Friday, and all the proposals that were put forward in the House of Commons yesterday were rejected also. The European Union is due to meet for a European Council meeting next Monday to decide what to do. They said that they want to hear from the British by Friday for the British to explain what they're going to do. Theresa May briefly floated this idea of a fourth vote on her deal, which is absolutely stark-raving incredible. But it seems that the Speaker, John Bercow, made it very clear to her that that was not going to be allowed and wouldn't happen. And it seems that she's now come up this evening with this last desperate throw of the dice. She's called in Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader. The idea is that the two of them will get together in a room in 10 Downing Street, presumably with their advisors, and that they're going to sort of thrash out some kind of Brexit deal between them, which they will jointly put to Parliament in order to get Brexit done within the next few weeks. Now, I'm going to say briefly what I think about that idea. Firstly, I should say that I had supported back. Oh, okay. Oh dear. Yes. Yeah, as I was just saying, I can remember. Don't worry. What I was yes, if Jeremy Corbyn, yeah, if Jeremy Corbyn insists on a deal which includes a customs union and a second referendum, which the suggestions are that he will insist. Yeah. So let's say it again. Yeah, Theresa May got us. If Jeremy, yeah, yeah, if Jeremy Corbyn insists in this meeting on a deal which includes a customs union and a second referendum, then if Theresa May agrees to it, I predict civil war and a possible split in the Conservative Party. Whereas if Theresa May proposes that the deal Jeremy Corbyn is supposed to agree to is essentially the same deal that she has negotiated, which is what she is basically saying, then I expect that to be unacceptable to Jeremy Corbyn. So I am skeptical, very skeptical, that anything will come out of these talks, and I am very skeptical that anything that does come out of these talks will be acceptable to the Europeans next week. But we shall see.
Is Article 50 constitutional?
Is Article 50 constitutional? The answer is yes. If you mean by that, if the question, I take this as a question, the Article 50 is something that the British Parliament has invoked, and so Britain must leave the European Union on the 12th of April by law. That is the law of Britain. It is the law of the European Union, and it is also British law. So the answer, it is both constitutional and legal.
Okay, so where do we go from here, Alexander? What's next on the agenda?
The Europeans and some people in Britain are now increasingly talking about a no-deal Brexit in 2 weeks' time, in 11 days' time, being almost inevitable. I'm not personally convinced that's going to happen, but the logic of the situation points in that direction. I suspect we're going to find ourselves at some point over the next few days, perhaps on Friday, it will become clear again that the only real options are either Theresa May's deal or a variant of it, or a no-deal Brexit. And at that situation, I think the pressure in Britain will be very, very strong to agree to Theresa May's deal. But we shall see. And everybody has maneuvered themselves into a corner now.
All right. Thank you, Flying Dutchman, for your super chat. Leslie White sends a super chat. Will it end? When will it end? In hemp soon, Alexander. We'll end it all in hemp soon, Alex. We'll end it all in hemp soon, Alex. When will it end? I guess is the question. Yeah.
Alex, I wish I could answer that question. And in fact, I'm going to say something. Many, many people in Britain wish they could answer that question. The House of Commons is exhausted. If you see the MPs there, they are absolutely now looking like the walking dead. They've spent hours and hours and hours talking about this thing, unable to come up with any kind of solution. The government is exhausted. Theresa May is exhausted. More to the point, the business community is absolutely livid because they say without a clear sign of where this thing is going, they cannot plan because there is no certainty going forward for them to plan. So we are in this extremely difficult situation.
Right. What's going to be Corbyn's reaction to all of this? What do you expect from him?
Right. He has said that he will meet Theresa May. I don't think he has any choice to. I mean, I think that he probably calculates that what Theresa May is trying to do is to maneuver him into a situation where if a no-deal Brexit happens on the 12th of April, he is blamed for it. And he knows that that's going to be very unpopular with his own party. So I think he will try and meet Theresa May, but I think he will be extremely reluctant to actually agree to anything with her, because I think that he doesn't want to agree to her withdrawal plan, because that he's so toxic with his own party. So I think what he will try to do is to press her to agree to a customs union and a second confirmatory referendum. And I expect her to resist it because those proposals are toxic for her party.
All right. And the European Union, Alexander, what do you expect Tusk, Juncker, Merkel to say and do?
I think
and then get into Macron, who's also the wild card.
I think there's going to be a split within the European Union. I think Merkel, Tusk, and Juncker will try to get an extension. They will try to find a way to give Britain an extension, even if that involves the British participating in the European Parliament elections. I think Macron and some of the people in the European Commission, including increasingly clearly Michel Barnier, who's the chief negotiator, they're making it increasingly clear that their preferred solution is a no-deal Brexit, with Britain leaving on the 12th of April. This crisis brought finally and conclusively to an end, and with no British Eurosceptic MPs led by Nigel Farage in the European Parliament, siding with the various anti-EU populist politicians that are expected to be elected to the European Parliament in those elections from countries like Hungary, Italy, Poland, and the rest, and therefore no longer in a position to cause trouble. So I think there's going to be a split. I think there's going to be a battle. I think unless the British come up with something that Merkel, Juncker, and Tusk can use, the advantage is with Macron.
All right, so Macron has an advantage. Macron can lead the UK out of the EU. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It's so extraordinary that the most ardent, globalist, neoliberal, integrationist Macron, the leader of the pro-European forces in the EU, the integrationist forces, is now the Brexit leader's greatest hope. I mean, it's a bizarre situation But as I said, he may be the person who might save Brexit. And if so, what a terrible comment that is on the whole British political class.
All right, Alexander, can you get into a little bit about Bercow and his role?
Yeah, all right. I discussed, I hope people caught it,
Yeah,
that
because
why
I think a lot of people might have missed that part when
missed that part.
we were
Okay.
buffering. But get into a little more depth of Bercow.
Yes, I mean, I think the first thing to say is that Bercow has been, I mean, I've seen him now described as a rogue speaker. Bercow's role is that he's supposed to administer parliamentary procedure impartially and in accordance with the accepted procedures of the House of Commons, which essentially have a constitutional role because they safeguard the separation of powers, which is a critical part of the British Constitution. Now, I explained previously in that part of the programme, which perhaps people missed, that this whole indicative votes idea, whereby MPs put forward their proposals in Parliament, and then, if one follows the logic of some of the MPs, legislate and pass an act of Parliament which theoretically obliges the government to pursue a soft Brexit against its wishes. This whole indicative votes process is, in my opinion, unconstitutional because it goes against the doctrine of the separation of powers. It also puts the government in an unsustainable position where it is legally obliged to do something which it is actually opposed to doing, something which has never happened before in British constitutional history and which I think is wrong. Now, a proper speaker, a speaker properly concerned with the proper functioning of the Constitution would never have allowed this process to happen. He would have acted to prevent it. He would have ruled all ideas of holding these indicative votes and imposing legislation in this way as out of order. And instead, he has facilitated it because he is an ardent Remainer and he wants it to happen. The result is that a political crisis, which is what this whole Brexit debacle is, has become a constitutional crisis also, pitting Parliament not just against the people, or at least that part of the people who voted to leave in the referendum, but potentially also against the government and threatening to involve the Queen in decisions where she might be asked to sign an act of Parliament that contradicts the wishes of her own ministers.
All right, we have a super chat from Chris Lewis. Alexander, what do you think about the English Democrat High Court case against Theresa May?
The English Democrat High Court case.
Against Theresa May.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of cases now, which I'm afraid I'm losing track of. I suspect that this is, I mean, I was actually passing the House of Commons today. There's all sorts of people who are saying that she's acting ultra vires, that is to say, unconstitutionally. If that is what people are suing her for, then I think there might be great problems in pursuing that because the High Court doesn't like to interfere in what the government and Parliament does. And of course, most of the judges are known to be Remainers anyway. But realistically, even if I'm wrong, and even if that case were to succeed, given the way the High Court works in Britain, it's most unlikely to be decided before the 12th of April, when Britain is due to leave or when there is due to be another extension.
All right. And all the bets are on Britain leaving now.
Well, I hope so. I mean, can I just say something?
I mean, who were the two people? I read the articles. There was two, Letwin and who else said it's going to be
Michel Barnier.
And Barnier.
Michel Barnier, who is the Brexit negotiator, and of course Letwin, who was the arch Remainer who's trying to stop. Basically, he wants to stop Brexit. I hope Britain does leave on the 12th of April because if it does,
did you say he wants to stop Brexit?
yeah, I think so. I mean, Oliver Letwin is
Really?
one of the most pro-Remain people within the House of Commons. He's a conservative, but he's the inventor of this whole indicative process idea. He made an incredible speech, which has the lawyers up in arms, in which he says that by passing through this process, Parliament will set itself up as the government, which is, as I said, wholly unconstitutional. But his ultimate objective, I have no doubt about this, is to keep Britain within the EU in some form or other. Having said that, if Britain does leave on the 12th of April or soon after on a no-deal Brexit, on a no-deal basis, then that will end the political and constitutional crisis. The business people will have certainty, and we can all move on. If we don't, if there is an extension, not only will there be huge anger across the country, but we will have continued uncertainty. The division that already exists in the country will get worse, and the political and constitutional crisis in Britain will deepen even further. So I think for the country's best interests, we really need to leave. Incidentally, one other person who said that is Emmanuel Macron. That's why I said it's this bizarre situation where the arch integrationist in Europe is now becoming, in a sense, the great friend and advocate of Brexit. It's a bizarre situation, one I would never have imagined, but it's a sign of the collapse, incompetence of the British political class that it has come to that.
All right, guys, I hope the stream got a lot better since we cut off a little bit because of buffering. I think it has. Release the Hounds has a question, Alexander, which is what I wanted to ask you, actually. And that is, do you know if we have a long extension, will we be dragged back in by the Lisbon Treaty permanently? So if May gets her long extension, does that mean that pretty much the UK is stuck?
We've discussed this before, Alex. I don't personally have any doubt about this. If we get a long extension that people are talking about, if Britain participates in the European parliamentary elections, if it all ends up with a customs union and Britain being a member of the single market, then sooner or later a decision is going to be made that Britain is going to remain in the EU as a full member of the EU. That is the game that some people like Oliver Letwin are playing. That is the objective. They know that they can't cancel Brexit before the 12th of April. So their idea is, or their objective now is, to secure a long extension, because they know that if Britain gets that long extension, the likelihood is it will never leave. Now, it's not just the Lisbon Treaty. What will happen as night follows day is if we get Britain in the customs union, the European Court of Justice will say that Britain is also subject to free movement, which is what Theresa May is trying to prevent. And at some point, because we can't leave because of the Irish backstop, people will say, well, if we're subject to free movement, if we're subject to EU regulation, because we're a member of the customs union, and the European Court of Justice will say EU regulations apply, well, we might as well decide that we're just going to stay in. And before Britain formally leaves, I suspect that decision will be taken.
I have a question on the EU Parliament votes, Alexander. Is if the UK takes part in the voting, doesn't that de facto mean that the UK is stuck in the EU and there's going to be, no matter what happens in the House of Commons, that's it? I think, is it realistic for the UK to take part in the Parliament votes, which is coming up in May, I believe?
Again,
and then 1 month later say we're leaving?
Well, exactly. I mean, this is a point which, as I said, the Brexiteers are making here, the lawyers, the constitutional lawyers are making here, and from the other side of the fence, Macron and Barnier are also making. They're saying, what possible logic is there in having the British participate in European Parliament elections if Britain goes ahead and leaves afterwards? It makes no sense at all. And they're right. Obviously, they are. And again, you're absolutely right when you say if the British do participate in those elections, that is the strongest possible sign that Britain is not leaving the European Union. And I think anybody who thinks otherwise is simply deluding themselves. That is what that whole objective of getting Britain participating in the European elections and getting a long extension is all about. They all know, all those people who are advocating it know that if a long extension happens and Britain participates in the EU elections, Britain is not leaving. That is the reality.
That means Farage will be in the parliament. And what kind of scenario would you imagine there? Farage in the parliament after this entire debacle has taken place.
Right. I mean that's of course Macron's nightmare, because you will have Farage there, and we've done a video recently which shows what an intelligent and articulate and forceful leader he is, and of course he will ally himself with the much stronger anti-EU integrationist contingent that is expected to be elected to the European Parliament from countries like Italy, Poland, Hungary, and probably, by the way, France, because Marine Le Pen is expected to do well in this election, which will then quite possibly pull control of the EU Parliament away from the EU integrationists who have dominated it for as long as anybody can remember. So Macron needs an integrationist European Parliament if he is to pursue his integrationist strategy, because the EU Parliament has to agree the budget, it has to agree treaties, it has to agree many of the various laws. If he doesn't have a reliable Parliament working for him, he can't achieve the great objectives that he has set himself. And that's the major reason why he wants the British to go.
Now, if the UK does take part in the EU elections, in the Parliament elections, I can imagine that Farage's party and UKIP will do very, very well, correct?
Well, indeed. I mean, I think that's what most people expect. I mean, I think the great problem Farage has is that, of course, his new party, the so-called Brexit party, has only been reorganised very, very recently. So, I mean, because, of course, he quit the leadership of UKIP, and he's now in conflict with the leadership of UKIP. Though UKIP is still there, but it has gone into considerable decline. And without Nigel Farage leading it, it's perhaps not surprising that it would go into decline, because none of the other leaders are as effective as he is. But I would expect, despite the problems of Farage having formed his party, his new party, so recently, and despite his lack of organisation on the ground, there will be more than enough people in Britain very, very angry about what has happened, who will vote for Farage and his party in order to make the point about how angry they feel about what has happened in the way in which the whole Brexit that they were promised 3 years ago has been so comprehensively derailed.
All right, we have a super chat from Dim Sung. Not just Farage, George Galloway is standing for EU elections. They thought Farage could humiliate them. Think U.S. Senate versus Galloway. Galloway would also be a very strong voice in the Parliament if he did get there, correct?
Absolutely, and I think there's a pretty good chance that he will. I mean, I should say Galloway has his critics, but he is a highly articulate and very intelligent political operator and a very, very good and powerful orator. And a British contingent, which has both Farage and Galloway in the European Parliament, as I said, is for people like Macron an absolute nightmare. I mean, be very clear, Merkel won't like it either, but I suspect she can probably, up to a certain point, live with it. Macron won't like it at all because he has a much more ambitious program going forward than Merkel does. Merkel having committed herself to quitting soon anyway.
All right, guys. Hit that like button, share the channel with everybody you know. Go to the Durad shop, buy a t-shirt. That also helps us create broadcasts and news for you guys. Alexander, do you have anything else to say on the recent news, on today's news with Brexit? Anything else that you would like to wrap up on?
Yes, I have to say, I get a sense in Britain of total exhaustion and complete demoralisation. I mean, the Leavers are very, very angry about the way in which they feel, especially their Conservatives. They feel that the Conservative Party has, in effect, been stolen from them. There's actually now talk by some strong Leaver Conservative MPs that they might be prepared to vote against their government in a vote of confidence and bring the government down if Theresa May agrees to Corbyn's demands for a customs union and a referendum, a confirmatory referendum. So the Leavers are very angry. But I think the Remainers also are exhausted and very demoralised because they had their opportunity on Monday to, if you like, show their strength and gain control, or at least appear to gain control. I've always been sceptical of that. And in the event, they couldn't really organise and come together and put forward a plan of their own around which they all agreed. So all of them feel that they have failed, both the Leavers in Parliament and in the government, and the Remainers in Parliament and in the government. And what it highlights is the total lack of political leadership in Britain. There is no person in Britain who in Parliament or in the government who has the strength and imagination and who carries the respect to lead the country forward. In this hour of crisis, and it's the biggest crisis Britain has faced, in my opinion, since the end of the Second World War, Britain has been disastrously let down by its leaders. I have never known anything like this in my life, and I think a lot of people, myself included, feel very ashamed.
They have to get out. They have to get out. No deal. They have to get out. Otherwise, I think that if they don't get out, this is going to be such a monumental victory for the EU. That is it. There is no they're going to just put the jackboot on everybody, Brussels. I mean, they're just going to beat down every single country after this.
Well, indeed. I mean, can I just come back and say something which I said on a previous program? If Britain, with all its history, with the world's oldest parliamentary system, and oldest functioning constitution, with its big economy, with the power of the City of London, if Britain cannot leave the EU, which country can? Who can do it? We're all trapped in that case inside this prison, and there is no exit. I mean, it really does become Hotel California, as we were talking about in the live that we did just yesterday. And I think for Britain's sake, because as I said, it would be a crushing blow for a proud country with a proud history to be incapable of making an independent exit and acting on its own decisions. But also for the people of Europe, it would be a disaster, an absolute disaster, if Brexit doesn't happen now.
And I'd like to highlight that the UK is not even in the Eurozone. It's not even in the common currency, and it still couldn't make an exit. Can you imagine a country like Hungary, like Greece, Italy, any of these countries? Well, Hungary doesn't have the currency, but Greece, Italy, Spain, any of these countries trying to get
Well,
out.
absolutely. I mean, it doesn't even bear thinking about. The one thing I would say is that, of course, I come back to what I said about the lack of political leadership in Britain. Obviously, if another country, perhaps Italy, produces a leader, a real leader, not this, absolutely dismal political class that we have in Britain, a real leader, then maybe they can make a success of it where Britain has failed. But it will be far more difficult to do because Britain has failed. And that, in a sense, is the greatest betrayal of all by Britain's political class.
All right. Anything else you want to add, Alexander, as we sign
Well,
off?
just to say, and I think actually I said it, but apparently someone else said it, that I think it was a Conservative MP, Michael Fabricant, who said Britain needed a Churchill, and what she got instead was a Chamberlain. In other words, and I think that's right. I mean, except I think that in truth, Chamberlain was actually a much more effective political operator than these dreadful people that we have now, who it seems to me are beyond useless and collectively useless. But there we are.
I see someone talking about Biden. We have a video on Biden coming up. I'll get that up tomorrow. We also have a really good video on what's going on in Venezuela between Trump and Putin. We'll get that. We'll try to get both those videos up tomorrow as well. Alexander, she'll go down in history as the worst prime minister.
Oh, people are saying it. People are already saying it. They're saying that, Cameron was bad, Theresa May was worse.
Blair was a war criminal.
Indeed. I mean, we've had a succession of disastrous prime ministers. I mean, John Major was pretty awful as well. I mean,
yeah, but he was like a small little footnote. He wasn't. I mean, he wasn't very impactful. Major.
He wasn't very impactful, and what he did perhaps didn't have, larger consequences. With Theresa May, the consequences are disastrous.
I mean, the UK needed a real leader now. They really needed a leader.
Absolutely. Maybe not a Churchill, but they needed someone, clear-headed and strong with a clear idea of what to do. And let's be very clear. Let me say this very clearly. There were lots of opportunities. A strong leader, even a halfway strong leader, would never have got themselves into this mess. I mean, Theresa May not only failed in the negotiations disastrously, but by insisting that it was only her deal that was on offer, and by repeatedly putting it back to the House of Commons and refusing to take a no for an answer, she has reopened the whole discussion about whether Britain was going to leave the EU or not, and has put the whole Brexit project in jeopardy. So she has been a disaster from every point of view.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Theresa May, the disaster.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us on this chat. We really apologize for it cutting out and the buffering, but we've got some plans to beef up our infrastructure and make things a little smoother. I think the second half of the live chat went a lot smoother, and I think the picture was a lot clearer and the sound was a lot clearer. All right, everybody, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your super chats. We really appreciate it. Stay tuned. Tomorrow we have some really good videos on the way, and we think you guys will like the content that we're putting out. Alexander,
and we will keep you informed.
when will this end so we can get some sleep? That's my question that I have for Theresa May.
Absolutely, indeed, quite so. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't think anybody does. I mean, we're in one of those. It's like one of those awful films, like The Alien.
I'm tired. I'm losing my voice. I'm like Theresa May. I mean, come on.
You're sort of thrashing around, and this nightmare never ends. You never seem to get out of it. It's very, very creepy. And of course, if you're here in Britain, it's even more so because, as I said, there just doesn't seem to be an exit now. And maybe Macron will come and save the situation, and maybe he won't.
Jesus, there's words to end the stream with. Maybe Macron will come and save the situation. We'll leave it at that, guys. Maybe we're all betting on Macron. We're all hoping for Macron to come in and save the day. We're waiting for Macron to come in and save the day. Unbelievable. Alexander McCurse, the Oracle of London, once again, thank you for your insight. Thank you, everybody. We hope you have a good night, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world.
Mm.